Hello, everyone. My name is Heidi Picoy, and I'm the Texas PTA Treasurer. Today, we are going to review the spotlight for the financial reconciliation. Our learning objectives today are: what is a financial reconciliation? What is the purpose? When do we complete it? Who does the work? How it's done? When we report it? We'll review the process the committee will follow and the report that they will create. So what is a financial reconciliation? It's a thorough review of the records of the PTA by a special committee of non-signers. The current secretary or incoming treasurer, or anyone related by blood or marriage, and who do not reside in the same household as the authorized signers. The committee is also appointed by the president. So why do we do a financial reconciliation? Before the next signers begin their work, we want a neutral group of members to verify the accuracy of the financial records of the PTA, to ensure the membership that the PTA policies and procedures were followed, make sure we qualify for and maintain fidelity bond coverage, which is for the insurance. So you have to have a non-signer review the bank statement, 2 people to count money at the same time, and a financial reconciliation is required. They will also check that all legal reporting requirements are met. The goal is not to find something wrong, but to keep everyone accountable, not just the treasurer, but the entire board. We want to make sure we are following best practices, and if not, recommend procedures to begin doing so. So, when do we perform a financial reconciliation? Per the bylaws, 1, at the end of the fiscal year. 2, when any authorized check signer is added or deleted on any bank account, and any time deemed necessary by the president or 3 or more members. That is section 3A. For the financial reconciliation required at the end of the fiscal year, the president shall appoint the committee at the last membership meeting of the year. A financial reconciliation is also part of a Texas PTA state review. This is when a Texas PTA assigned team comes in to review the records of the PTA, which is extremely uncommon. According to the bylaws, who does the work? As we mentioned, the president will appoint, subject to the approval of the executive board, a financial reconciliation committee consisting of not less than 3 members who are not authorized signers. The bylaws also state that the current secretary and incoming treasurer will not be on the financial reconciliation committee, nor anyone related by blood or marriage to the authorized signers, or anyone living in the same household as them. So who prepares the records? The outgoing or returning treasurer and the outgoing or returning secretary are responsible for putting the financial records, minutes, and governing documents in order for the committee. Now, this is something new that we had added because we wanted to make sure that everyone knew that the secretary was responsible for putting together those governing documents. So what do we need? We need the previous financial reconciliation report, the current year annual report, which is a budget versus actual, the complete general ledger, which lists all the transactions for the entire year or the period being reviewed. Some PTAs do a mid-year audit, so the annual audit does not take as long. You need the approved budget as amended, filing reports for the period being reviewed, financial reports, all checks for all accounts, cleared, voided, and unused. Now, images of the clear checks on the bank statement are sufficient because, to be honest, I'm not quite for sure any banks actually send you back the checks in the mail anymore. Now, where you can find a list of all of this information is currently on the Texas PTA website under Financial Reconciliation. You will see the Financial Reconciliation Checklist, and you'll want to use this as your procedures as you're going through the financial reconciliation. You will also need bank statements for all accounts, all receipts and deposit records, all receipts for expenditures and the check request forms, any type of electronic banking documents, which would be any type of credit card statements. If you use Square or PayPal, you want to make sure you have that documentation for the committee. And any tax reporting documents such as the sales tax in the appropriate Form 990, and any correspondence from the State Comptroller's Office or the IRS. The Secretary will provide the copies of the minutes from the membership and the executive board meetings, a list of all dues paying members in the executive board. So that means you'll want a roster of all the board members, the current approved bylaws and standing rules if applicable, report all fundraising events since the last sales tax return was filed. You will include the dates held, if there's a tax-free designation, the total sales, and any taxable sales, and the amount of sales tax collected. Any other information requested by the Financial Reconciliation Committee, possibly a contract for the fundraiser. During the financial reconciliation, as soon as the fiscal year ends, the treasurer can no longer write checks. Checks should only be written in the case of an emergency and should be signed by the incoming treasurer. Signature cards at the bank, as well as for any debit credit card in use, should be changed immediately. Check with your bank to find out who needs to be there and what documents you need with you. Banks often have different rules and they seem to change year to year also. You will find that they will normally need a current copy of your bylaws and the meeting minutes showing who the signers will be and what their positions are. When and where? Once the books have been closed for the financial reconciliation, generally, the financial reconciliation should be completed. Excuse me, let me restate that. Once the books have been closed for financial reconciliation, normally it's 2 weeks after the fiscal year end. Whenever the Financial Reconciliation Committee can meet for a 2 to 3 hour time period, the outgoing treasurer should not be there, but should be available by phone to answer any questions. Typically, the committee will only need to meet once, but if they don't have all the materials needed or they are not well organized, it's possible they may need to meet more than once. And remember, all information discussed in the financial reconciliation process is confidential. A private place where conversations cannot be overheard is recommended. You will also find on the Texas PTA website under the Financial Reconciliation page a form for the committee to sign for notice that the committee is confidential. Only the final written report is made available to the Texas PTA Executive Board and the membership. Now, conducting the financial reconciliation. Begin by checking the beginning balance. It should be the closing balance on the previous financial reconciliation. You will review the checks. Every check should have the proper documentation, such as a funds request form, a receipt or invoice. Spot check the signatures for only the signers who are authorized. Check to see the checks are not being signed by the individual to whom they are payable. Confirm no checks were made payable to cash. If you need petty cash, or as others call it, a till for an event, the checks need to be written to an individual. Then that individual would go to the bank and get the denominations that they need for the event. Verify all expenses are within the approved budget and are recorded on the financial reports. If your standing rules approve the use of a credit or debit card, verify that the card was only used for those authorized to do so. Confirm that there are not any ATM usage, cash backs, or cash advances. All transactions need a paper trail. As with checks, a funds request form and receipt should be evidence that the card was used appropriately. Confirm purchases are clearly tied to the budget and are recorded on the financial reports. Now, let's talk about deposits. Check that deposits were made shortly after each event where funds were collected. We don't want money sitting unattended for any length of time. Check to verify that 2 people counted the money at the same time and a deposit form was used and signed by the counters. If PayPal or another electronic system is used, documentation of these deposits should be clearly tied to budget categories and reported on the financial report along with any associated fees. You will also need to verify and review the minutes. Verify a quorum is noted. Verify financial reports are recorded. The beginning and ending balances, including total income and total expenses for the period being reported. For example, January ending balance is the same as the February beginning balance for that type of meeting. So reports and balances are different for board versus membership meetings because you don't normally have a membership meeting every time you have a board meeting each month. Look for a record of the budget and any amendments being adopted by the membership, meaning you want to verify that amendments were voted on by the membership and not just the executive board. Look for a record of any tax-free fundraisers and make sure they were approved prior to the event. This could be in the executive board minutes or the membership minutes. Verify the executive board approve all plans of works and contracts. And remember, contracts are only to be signed by the president. Review the bylaws are current and standing rules if applicable. Verify that a non-signer has reviewed, initialed, and dated all bank statements. I also suggest that the PTA use the non-signer bank statement review form. You can find that on the Texas PTA website for the treasurer. Verify that bank reconciliations are done monthly. That is done by the treasurer. All items reported on the bank statement are reflected on the treasurer's report and checkbook. That would be the general ledger. Make sure that money collected, donated for a specific purpose was spent only for that purpose. And that is what you call designated funds. Check for the annual report and verify it will be retained as part of the permanent file. The annual report is for the beginning of the fiscal year to the end of the fiscal year. Make sure and confirm that the Texas and National PTA portions of the dues are not recorded as income in the budget, but kept separate or recorded as escrow or liability. Depending on what accounting software you use, determines which word. If you use the Texas PTA Treasurer software, it is called escrow. If you are using the PTA EZ accounting software, it is called liability. Verify that the amount of dues sent to Texas PTA agrees with the membership roster and all board members have joined the PTA. Verify that the appropriate 990 filing has been filed, verify the appropriate Form 990 has been filed and accepted by the IRS. If you file the 990 in, that can be done one day after the fiscal year end. If you file the 990 EZ or Form 990, the treasurer should have a draft of that report and be ready to file it after the financial reconciliation has been completed. Verify sales tax, if applicable, has been recorded properly and a report is available for the incoming treasurer. Draw a red line across the checkbook where the financial reconciliation concluded and sign. And you will also need to complete the financial reconciliation report. That can be found on the financial reconciliation page of the Texas PTA website. And it is I believe the third or fourth page of the checklist. Now let's talk about if there are irregularities. If there is a consistent disregard for procedures and policies for handling disbursements and deposits, or a lack of proper filing of tax documents, you will want to note this. Remember that we are talking about consistent disregard. If one or two checks don't file the check signing procedure, this is not reportable. If the Financial Reconciliation Committee does find irregularities in the records of the treasurer, the following steps should be followed. Contact the treasurer to secure additional records or information. It is always okay to ask the treasurer questions. I come across several committees who just tend to write up every single thing they find instead of asking the treasurer if perhaps these documents were not provided to them. So please reach out to the treasurer before completing the report. If the matter cannot be settled to the committee's satisfaction, contact the current president to work out what additional steps need to be taken. The president may request additional guidance from the council PTA president or the assigned field service representative. Now, let's talk about reporting. Here's an example of what the report looks like. The goal of this report is not to point fingers, but to make sure proper record keeping takes place in the future. Once completed, a member of the Financial Reconciliation Committee should make a report to the membership at the first meeting held after the conclusion of the financial reconciliation. The report will state if the reconciliation was complete or not, and if the records were found to be correct, substantially correct, The association should adopt the report at that time. If the report is following the end of the fiscal year, a copy of the annual report should be attached to the financial reconciliation report and maintained permanently by the treasurer and placed in the minutes. In the event a complete financial reconciliation cannot be done due to the unavailability of records, this must be reported to the membership. Steps should be recommended for adoption to correct this situation. This is where the committee would give their recommendation on what policies and procedures should be in place. Now, in the event, which we don't like to talk about, that there is substantial evidence that theft or fraud has occurred, the PTA must follow the Texas PTA theft and fraud policy. You can find this at txpta.org/policies. And keep in mind that this committee is confidential. So you will want to make sure that you are very careful about sharing information that you find during the Financial Reconciliation Committee, especially if you are coming across severe errors or the evidence of theft and fraud. We do not want to accuse someone without having the proper evidence. Now, let's talk about your resources. As mentioned, on the Texas PTA website, under Treasurer, you can find several forms that the PTA should be using. You will find the financial reconciliation checklist, which you need to follow. It also has frequently asked questions on the very last page of the checklist that you might find helpful. You can find that at txpta.org/financial-reconciliation. Your council PTA or your field service representative are often a quick and effective resource. You have Texas PTA, National PTA, and then of course the Texas PTA Finance Department and the Texas PTA Treasurer. The treasurer, my email at the time, is treasurer@txpta.org. We are always here and available to answer any questions you have. And I want to thank every one of you for taking the time to listen to this spotlight today. And please do not hesitate should you have additional questions. Thank you.